Good morning. This is Richard Gottlieb. I'm here in New York City. So good morning from here, and possibly good evening or good afternoon wherever you are. Today we're going to take a look at what I foresee is happening after the COVID-19 is no longer with us. And yes, it will at some point go away. We know that. So it's important to take a look ahead at what the world may look like. And in doing so, what I want to do today is take you through some macro events that I think we need to take a look at. And I'm going to review each of these. And then when I'm finished, I'm going to go back and we're going to make some predictions. So what we're going to look at, first of all, is the 1918 flu, which is an interesting way to get a little bit of a sense of how what we're going through now fits historically, and is there anything we can learn from the 1918 flu? And then you're going to see a picture of a bird there. He is a stork, and so we're going to be talking about childbirth, both what the direction has been in childbirth and what we see as what's happening to childbirth due to coronavirus. And then we're going to take a look at a divergence in the parental class. In other words, we're going to take a look at how we're going to have two kinds of parents. It's simplistic, but basically parents who are extremely wealthy and have a lot of money to spend, and then the rest of us. And then after that, of course, we're going to take a look at retail and e-commerce. We're going to look at logistics. We're going to take a look at the workplace, school, and then finally we'll take a look at the new normal. So let's start with the 1918 flu virus. And the first thing I wanted to point out about this thing was horrible. It was much bigger than the current coronavirus in terms of death. So this was a devastating epidemic for the world. 50 million people died from this thing, and 500 million people caught it. And to give you some perspective, right now, not even 1 million people have died from COVID. That's a lot, but it's not $50 million, 50 million people. So I was thinking about this one day, and it suddenly occurred to me that other than in Germany, which of course after World War I suffered economically, most of the world did not go into any kind of a depression or even a recession after the 1918 flu epidemic, which really ran into 1920. As a matter of fact, the 1920s were called the Roaring Decade, Roaring 20s, because so much was going on. During that flu epidemic, the stock market actually went up 11% at the height of the flu epidemic, which is kind of similar to what's going on right now with the stock market, which is also up. And in addition, some academic research indicates that actually there was a shortage of labor due to the flu epidemic of 1918. So based on that, it appears that, again, based on history, that we can hope that once the COVID-19 is over, that we'll go back to some pretty good employment figures, and we will not have suffered a depression, and hopefully not a major recession. And here's what I thought was very interesting, though. And that as I said, this is from a quote from Thomas Garrett, who's the assistant vice president and economist of the Federal Bank of St. Louis. And he said that most of the evidence indicates that the economic effects of the 1918 influenza pandemic were short-term. So let's hope he's right about that. Let's hope that's applicable to what we're going through right now. The next area I want to talk about is the birth rate. And the birth rate affects us, of course, because if we produce fewer children, we have fewer consumers. This is anybody who's in the business of selling products to children, this is an important issue. And what I'm showing you here is a graph that tracks births from 1950, and it projects ahead to 2100. But if you look, the general trend has been down in births. And the Brookings Institution estimates that the United States could see 300,000 to 500,000 fewer births next year as a result of the coronavirus. So that means on top of the fact that we've had this trend in a drop-off in childbirths, what we're also seeing is that because of the coronavirus, it's even more people are choosing not to have children. Now, of course, this kind of runs a little counter logically to what we typically think, because we think, everybody's at home and they got nothing better to do, so you end up having babies. Well, it doesn't work that way, and people are choosing not to have babies because they frankly don't want to go to the hospital, and so it's really reduced that because of that factor. And another factor is that unemployment. People lose jobs. They're not secure about their work situation, so they choose not to have a child at this time. Of course, and I thought this was an interesting statistics, that there is no gender. Now, this is about general trends in having fewer children. That there is no country in the world that is a gender equal country that also has a high birth rate. So between education, between access to birth control, and towards a world in which women tend to have more choice and are more equal, we're going to take a look at this. This needs to really be paid attention to, this decline in births. And I'm just going back to 1918 for a minute, that in that particular case, there was also a big decline in births due to the flu epidemic. And what they found is those women never made up the difference. In other words, they didn't have babies later because they didn't have them during the 1918 flu epidemic. So bottom line, expect to see this continuing trend and a sharp decline in the number of births. And this is going to have an impact on retail sales of anything that's youth directed. Now I want to talk to you about the rise of the older first-time parent. It's interesting that, as I've stated, there are this decline in childbirths has been taking place. At the same time, the only area in which we see an increase in childbirth is in women in their late 30s and early 40s. And it's really created by a wealth gap. And as you can see here from the New York Times, this quote, "The rise of the older first-time parent, late 30s and early 40s, is creating an expanding wealth gap between families that varies by where the parents live now and how much education they have." So I think this is really an important phenomenon, and I will go into why that is. First of all, if you're a person in your late 30s or early 40s, you typically have an established marriage. You are both, in most situations, earners. You have a lot of money. This is your first time. This is your first child, and you're going to spend a lot of money on this child because you you have a lot of money. So these types of parents tend to live in large metropolitan areas. I think this raises the question, do we no longer have an average shopper? You know, we've always said, as an example, the average price point for a product should be, I'm just going to say, $19.99, euros, dollars, or whatever. And I'm not sure that we could say that anymore. I think there may be two hot price points. One for people who are middle and lower income. But then there's a class of parent that has so much money that they made their hot price point maybe 99 euros, maybe 149 euros. So I think going forward, it's going to be very important to consider these two classes of parents, plan your distribution and your pricing based on these markets. And maybe instead of taking a kind of one market approach, taking a look at these cities like in the United States, we would say New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Atlanta, and maybe actually drive more expensive products into those markets than say you would elsewhere. So watch out for this higher income parent who tends to be very digitally savvy. They shop online. They're busy. Maybe their grandparents or parents might have shopped at a department store, but they're going to shop online. So it's a different consumer. Now let's look at retail and e-commerce. One of the things that's been happening is, and this has been going on for a long time, is this pursuit of efficiencies in retail. And right now we find that the internet is being supercharged by the current coronavirus situation in which people are going online to shop. And so we're going to see a very abrupt rise in e-commerce sales, and that will not change back. And then we're going to see other sectors attempting to emulate Amazon, which has been so successful. So as an example, just recently, here in the United States, the Kroger company, which is a supermarket company, very, very large, and CVS, which is a very, very large drugstore chain, have announced that they're going to use their already existing digital platforms to carry products beyond groceries in the case of Kroger, beyond drugs in the case of CVS, and really expand out and attempt to compete with an Amazon or a Walmart. So this will be a very important thing to watch as we see other platforms attempting to compete with Amazon. I'm concerned about department stores. I think that the challenge there is that those people who shop in department stores tend to be the people who have the two things that are required to shop online, and that is an internet connection and credit. And those who don't have those things have to shop at very low discount stores. So department stores are getting hit really hard because their consumer base, which is more affluent and more digitally savvy, is moving to the internet. Where we do see strength because of this is, as I mentioned, those people who don't have credit or are not connected to the internet are shopping at these very low cost, high value stores like here in the United States, Dollar General, which has about 20,000 stores, Aldi, Little, Family Dollar. These kinds of chains are doing very, very well. And so we're going to see bricks and mortar struggle at the top, and we're going to see a lot of continued growth at the bottom. And then I think one other prediction here is that we're going to see opportunities for small startups. The coronavirus has been, or COVID-19 has been very challenging for small startup retailers. But it's also been challenging for major retail chains. And many of them have closed stores during this period. It is highly doubtful that they're going to be reopening anytime soon after the coronavirus is over, which means there are going to be areas that are going to have real opportunities for smaller retailers who are going to go into these areas where these big chains once were located. And I'm predicting we're going to see a lot of small startups. I believe there will be investment and credit available to them to get going. I think there's going to be a lot of empty real estate that's going to go for very, very sharp, low prices in terms of rentals. So I'm optimistic for the small retailer. Okay, let's talk about global trade, which has been quite a couple years. You know, we've, for many of us, Hong Kong is the center of the world, and China in terms of where we get our production. As we know, Hong Kong has struggled in terms of civil unrest, and China and the United States in particular, and to some degree other countries, has been engaged in tariffs and disagreements, which are a concern to world trade. And politics really gets into this in terms of we have elections in the United States right now. That is a huge determiner in terms of what kind of positions politicians take. Brexit, of course, is a real open-ended issue right now. It's gotten pretty wild. We're not sure how that's going to come out. So here's my prediction. First of all, that China will continue to be the global source for manufacturing, not due to lowest price, but to infrastructure. If you've been to China, if you've been into southern China as an example, and you see just the enormous number of factories, design studios, highways, harbors with huge container cargo infrastructure, you can see that there's really no other country in the world that is capable at short notice or even some long notice of taking on the amount of manufacturing that is done in China. Vietnam is not a big country. Thailand is not a big country. India is trying to get in the game, but their infrastructure is still not up to where it needs to be. So I think we're going to see China continue to be a real center for manufacturing for the time to come. It doesn't look like it, but that's an attaché case or a briefcase at the top of the picture there. And this is about what's going to happen in terms of work. And as the work from home experiment stretches on, we're finding that a lot of people are happy working from home, but not everybody is. And they're finding now that projects are taking longer. Training it's tougher to train new people when they're not on site. Hiring and integrating new employees into the company is harder. You know, when you employ somebody, you want them to also understand the business culture and to be part of it. And if you're not there, it's very, very difficult. And employers are beginning to say that they feel that their employees are less connected. Young professionals aren't developing at the same rate, and that in general, I think that management feels disconnected from those who work for them. Now, We've just recently heard from the CEO of Netflix, the CPO of JP Morgan, saying that they don't like this work from home. They're going to want everybody to come back. But let me tell you what I think is the biggest reason people are going to return to work and to the office, and that is real estate. JP Morgan, who I just mentioned, has literally just opened a 2.5 million square foot office building in New York. It is equipped to fit 15,000 employees. Are those people coming back to the office? You bet they're coming back to the office, because nobody's going to invest in that kind of space and not use it. So I think we're going to see a return to work. In terms of school, the technology is an example, like Zoom and these different ways that schools are trying to engage children in distance learning. The technology's there, but the art of the technology is not there. And this has become a high stress point for parents in particular. They hate it. Children hate it. Teachers hate it. And as soon as possible, I believe we're going to see children going right back to school. And school functions and provides an important function in our culture because it's a babysitter. That's how they're able to go to work. And so looking forward, I think we're going to see that in terms of back to school. So here's what the new normal, I think, is going to look like. I think we're going to see a limited economic downturn. I think we're going to, of course, there are people out of work, and I think younger people who are fresh out of college are struggling more. But overall, the economies will return, and I think we're going to be back to normal economically sooner than later. I think that we will see the population continue, the birth rate. As I mentioned, I think we're going to see a severe drop-off in the number of children coming into the economy over the next several years. I think it's going to take a while that people start having babies again. And remember, during difficult times, when people don't have jobs, they don't do family formation. They don't get married. They don't move in together. They don't have children because they're economically uncertain. So we need to be prepared for the fact there's just going to be fewer child consumers, in particular, over the next few years. We're going to see two financial classes of parents. We need to, I think this is important to pay attention to this. And in terms of, with fewer children being born, it's going to be important to provide higher priced products to those parents who can afford to pay more to make up for some of the losses in terms of lack of children in the economy. I think we're going to see a continuing acceleration in e-commerce and with a decline in department stores and the rise of deep discount retailing. Opportunities for small retailers coming up. It's going to be a good time to be an entrepreneur. We're going to see most employees moving back to the office, although we will see some flexibility. Children returning to school. Anxiety will be there over global trade. Politicians are going to keep us very worried. But I believe that we are a very economically integrated world, and the economic pressures to maintain global trade will be too big for the politicians to overcome, and that China will remain the world's largest factory. Richard Gottlieb, and if you'd like to reach me, here is my contact information.